Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are joining us from. Welcome to today's webinar, Planning Your Agency's Microsoft 365 Strategy. We hope that you and your families are all staying healthy and safe as we navigate these very challenging times. We understand that your agency may have been faced with some major changes in the past several weeks. We hope that today's topic will provide you with the information to help your business operate effectively, no matter where you're working from, whether it's home or the office like Adam. Microsoft 365 provides the ability to work from anywhere and anytime, simplifying data accessibility, collaboration, and communication with your agency. So for those of you who are joining us that may not be familiar with Kite Technology, we are actually a full-service IT and consulting firm specializing in serving independent insurance agencies nationwide. We strive to provide comprehensive technology management and consulting that helps agencies to improve their business performance and operate more effectively. What sets Kite Tech apart from other IT companies is our long-standing expertise with insurance. Many of our staff have previous backgrounds within the industry, and our team has extensive familiarity with agency management systems, agency processes, and compliance regulations. We also work with businesses in many different industries, and much of that growth has come via referrals and from our happy clients who have customers that also require IT support.
What are we doing today?
Great question, Adam. So today's plan, we're going to talk about what role your agency management system plays in document management. Also, we're going to talk a little bit about the overview of Microsoft 365. Also, we're going to talk about Microsoft 365 and how it would work best for your agency. We're going to give you a few tips on what next steps you can take, and then of course we'll get to some great question and answer. So let's get started. So of course you're probably wondering who these people are on your screen. My name is Lauren Tripp. I'm a senior agency consultant with Kite Technology Group. I work with agencies who are interested in migrating to Applied Epic from any other agency management system. We also work with agencies who are looking to optimize and create efficiencies within their agency once they've migrated to a new system. We develop workflows, do a lot of employee training. So we have a wide variety of services that we provide in agency consulting. My background specifically is in insurance. I did come from working in the insurance industry with a couple of different agencies in the past before I came to Kite Technology. And my most recent agency is actually where I met our director, Aurora Berg. She actually consulted our agency at the time on migrating to Epic. So long story, but and a shout out to some of my previous coworkers who are on the call today too. Hey guys. So
Awesome.
Adam, tell me a little about yourself, Adam.
Sure. So my name, Adam Atwell. My job title is Director-Professional Services. Director of Professional Services here at Kite Tech. I've been on board here for about 10 years, serving in various capacities. Currently, my job is to help organize and manage our projects team. So anything above and beyond our monthly service agreement falls to my department and me to manage. In addition to that, the last 2 years I've taken a pretty big role in helping lead and chart our growth into the Microsoft 365 space and how we can take those technology solutions and serve our clients. Big picture planning and seeing IT work for businesses in unique ways is a passion of mine. And I don't come from an insurance agency directly, so I don't have that level of expertise like a large majority of our team does. But I certainly, work with technology and know it well. So I'm excited to be here today and speak with everyone.
Thanks, Adam.
Welcome.
So like we said earlier, we're going to talk a little bit about what the role of your agency management system is in document management. So a good question that you're probably asking is, what would you put in your agency management system? All of you probably know the answer to that question for the most part, but more specifically, we want to make sure that you understand kind of the difference in what should belong in an agency management system versus how you can store things in Office 365. So when you're looking at putting information in your agency management system, it's going to be things that are the end result, things like a policy, an endorsement, completed applications that may have been completed by the client. You've got correspondence with your clients and your underwriters, and could be completed proposals as well. Those are all things that would be related to the client directly. And so you're going to want to make sure you save that information and associate it to a client generally, right? Then you also have company information that you can store in your agency management system, things like commission statements, maybe agency agreements. Those are all documents that you can associate to a company listed in your database. And then also, I know some agency management systems also have a vendor option. So if you're utilizing the vendors within your agency management system, then you can store documents that are specific to those as well. Maybe it's invoices, agreements that you have with the vendor, and things like that. So really the role of your agency management system is to store those types of documents, those end result documents, things that are completed and that associate directly to an entity that is in your agency management system. So we really want to identify, now that you know what belongs in the system, where do you put all the rest of the documents? So that's something that Adam is going to tell us a little bit more about Microsoft 365 and where we can put the rest of our documents. So Adam, hand it off to you.
So one of the words that you guys have probably heard us use a couple times is Microsoft and Office. And then we attach the whole 365 calendar year thing on the end of it. It's important to know before we kind of talk about the technical detail a little bit of the evolution. And you can't really do that without kind of talking about how Microsoft confuses us with their marketing and branding. So that being said, just about the April 21st, I believe, was the official date where Microsoft launched new names for the plans that they've had that a lot of you may already be familiar with. And so it's important to just say that in the midst of this conversation, you may hear us say Microsoft 365, or you may hear us say Office 365. And I want you guys to know that we're using those words interchangeably because we're a little bit trying to keep up with what Microsoft's doing. In addition to that, just know that Microsoft's probably going to change the name again to Microsoft 364 plus one or something. And when they do, just be ready for it.
They do it to mess with us.
Yeah, they just want to keep us on our toes. So again, the name change came in effect on April 21st, and we're going to see a little bit more of that detail later. But before we jump there, let's just kind of talk about the evolution of Office 365. So many of you may not know this, but Office 365's initial state started in something called Live at EDU, which is actually an education product. Now, I actually came from education professionally before I came to Kite Tech, and that's why I know it. And in its simplest form, it was really one thing. It was hosted email associated with students and teachers and even parents at one point. But that being said, this was, almost a decade ago now at this point, actually a little earlier than that Microsoft started seeing the trend of things going from on-prem to the cloud. And once that started, I think they said, how can we figure this out and start that movement? And at the time, most of you are familiar with the Office application suite, Office 2003, Office 2007, hopefully Office something newer like Office 365, but the applications themselves were always there. And then Microsoft started to say, hey, we're seeing this shift and folks are moving to the cloud. They're starting to, need other things, decentralized servers, and we want to get folks leveraging those pieces. So this wheel here in front of you kind of shows a little bit of the evolution of things inside of the Office 365 space. You don't really see the apps mentioned there, the desktop applications, but you do see some of the other services there. OneDrive and Office as itself, SharePoint's in there. In addition to that, Skype and just a couple of the ancillary pieces that Microsoft built. Then after I think they kind of realized that, hey, this is a lot of stuff. and a lot of tools to put in front of people. How can we really kind of distill this down? And so they've started to really carve out pieces and to try to really position their marketing to say, hey, here's what you need. And so that kind of takes us to the newer version of the marketing, which is Office 365 has evolved to Microsoft 365. And so simply said, the diagram that you see here does a very basic breakdown of the main components of Microsoft 365. It's comprised of apps plus services equals awesome. Yep, I'll do it one more time. Apps plus services equals awesome. Yep, so specifically, yep, you got me. Specifically, the Office apps you're all familiar with. It's the desktop apps of Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Outlook, and then even OneNote. OneNote was a later add to the Office suite, but it's became an integral part as Office 365 was built and Microsoft 365 continues to grow. In addition to those Office apps, they're really starting to market the services that surround those apps and make them function together. The first one there, Exchange, is the email service backend, and that you maybe have never heard the word Exchange, but it's just the email backend. In addition to that, where you might store files and folders across OneDrive and SharePoint, and then kind of extending those core services of apps, the desktop apps plus email and individual and shared files. And then the bottom half of the services diagram shows the three most recent evolutions, and they're really taking off at quite a rapid pace in terms of growth, popularity, and need. Teams is the one, and Teams is a call, chat, and meet application. In there, you can do chat, you can do online meetings, and you can do calling. Intune is a device management application to help you keep your devices secure where you access your company data. And then Azure, depending on which part of the state, country, or world you're from, is Azure Information Protection is really some of the security features behind how all this stuff works. Microsoft's overarching cloud infrastructure is called Azure, and that's where all this stuff sits. It sits up in their cloud platform. So that's just kind of a high level, and to really bottom line that, it's Office apps plus services equals awesome.
You got to do the jive fingers though.
Yeah, I don't have the jive fingers. That's probably a little distracting, but anyways, so really we're going to kind of move into the conversation, and before we do, I think it's important to just kind of bottom line what we just discussed, and it's that agency management system and information that lives inside of it, and then the stuff that goes everywhere else. And that's kind of the content of the conversation we'd like to have here with you guys today.
Great. Thank you, Adam, for that explanation.
You're welcome.
So to preface our conversation that we're going to have today, we will be presenting questions that you may have as an agency about Microsoft 365 and some of the products that are included in that. I will be coming to you as a position of a senior agency consultant, obviously, kind of an agency professional perspective. And then Adam, of course, is our Microsoft 365 consultant, and he is our technical expert. So without further ado, Adam, I've got a first question for you. So tell me, Adam, what is the best place to start in my growth to Office 365 as an agency?
Awesome. So the great place to start is always one that you know and you're comfortable with. And just kind of referring back to that evolution of Office 365 and Microsoft's cloud offerings, the logical place to start really is inside of the Office application suite. Those desktop apps are things that most folks are using in some way, shape, or form today. And realistically, it's the foundation in terms of the end user experience to get you inside and leveraging all the other services that are built around it. So today, if you're using a version of the Office applications that is not a part of the Microsoft 365 subscription program, that's what you're going to want to start with. You need to get the subscription and get those apps in your environment. once you have those, then you kind of have a starting point for where the end users live and breathe inside of those apps. And in addition to those apps themselves, once you have the most recent version on the subscription model, the next step to take is really email. Most folks, it's the simplest step that they take. Some are already doing apps plus email. Some are just doing email. But realistically, you want to really get those two things as a foundational starting point. They have interoperability, meaning that they're dependent on each other. And
Right.
if you're not using those two at their core, Office apps plus email, then you'll find that your growth into the other services and offerings in there are pretty well limited. Yeah.
Got it. Great. Thanks. So the next question that we have for you is going to be, what is the difference between OneDrive and SharePoint? So we get, this question happens all the time, and even in our department, when we started using OneDrive and SharePoint, we were like, what goes where? Would have been a great time to have this webinar.
Right? A lot of people ask those kinds of questions, and the answer, in its simplest form in terms of the difference between OneDrive and SharePoint is really this simple. OneDrive was built around one person or one user, and SharePoint was built around sharing with multiple, and multiple could be a company or groups or departments of people inside of an organization. Um, that's it in its simplest, most basic form. OneDrive for one person,
Just one.
SharePoint for many. Jazz hands.
We're getting really good at that.
Yeah, we're working on our jazz hands for sure. So that's the difference between OneDrive and SharePoint. Built around a single person, built around many people.
Okay. Makes sense. So then why would I use OneDrive? Tell me more about how that works.
Sure. And it's important to just kind of say, you're probably using something today already to store your individual or personal documents. And realistically, what we see a lot is folks are using a couple of different things. They're either using one computer where they store their files on their desktop. Yep, I know you're out there. Yep, 1, 2, 3. You're probably doing it too, Lauren. So folks definitely still work off of their desktop. In addition to that, there's the local documents folder on your computer inside of your profile. And then in addition to that, you'll also see some folks that are actually storing their individual documents on a network server there, inside of their organization in some way. That being said, that's kind of the starting place for where individual documents are today. And so that kind of leads to your question of, well, why would I use OneDrive? And the primary reasons are because, one, it's built for one person, it's built for you. So that in itself is worth getting started with. But more seriously, it's your first step into really accessing that data wherever you're at. Microsoft's cloud environment is built with accessibility from anywhere in mind. And so once you start leveraging OneDrive, you'll be able to access your documents wherever you're at. Now, obviously, you do have to have an internet connection to actively work on your files. That's assumed in most scenarios nowadays. The entire Microsoft cloud infrastructure is built on a dependency of an active internet connection, but it still works when it's not there as well. So, OneDrive itself will store those changes and then write them up to the internet once you reconnect, if you were on a plane or something like that, traveling, etc. So getting your files on OneDrive gives you the ability to access them wherever you are, for sure.
Because you definitely can't take your My Documents with you, everywhere.
Well, you could, but then you end up with a big stack of papers, like this or whatever, and you've already lost half of them before you get out the door.
That's true. What a mess.
Yeah, I don't know how to operate with paper. That's just not a thing I really ever learned to manage well. But that's OneDrive in terms of accessibility. A couple of other practical uses for why to use OneDrive. Some of the big features that we see our customers take advantage of are things like versions of documents. And so, as you're editing documents, how many times have you gone and you've created X number of revisions in a document, and then you were wondering, well, where did that PowerPoint presentation really start? Because I remember we had that really one good slide. You can
Mhm.
actually go back and either revert those changes as a new file, or the same file. You can access versions really in unlimited. It can be configured to store as many as you might ever need, and that capability of versions isn't built to be as easily accessible on a local server environment.
Yeah,
Um,
I know there's definitely been situations where I'm like, what was the previous version? And all I get is like the last one, if it
right,
even saved that.
exactly. Yeah, one of those other problems that we hear about is the one that we've discussed a couple times when you're trying to get those attachments out or a group of files. Tell us a little bit about that
Yeah,
scenario we were talking about.
absolutely. So, when I worked in an agency, I remember some of our account managers wanting to send out large files, whether it was to an underwriter or, maybe this is back when we were trying to email policy documents. And of course, there's lots of other ways to share policies now, but those underwriting documents, for example, they would be, trying to break it down into multiple files or, try to compress it in a zip file,
Mm,
um, you know, just running circles trying to get this document down into a small enough way that they could email it to the underwriter. I think even fax might have been used at some point as a
oh yeah.
last resort.
Yep.
So, you know, using OneDrive, I know that in our department in agency consulting, we use it a lot for just sharing, workflow documents. That's a 250 to 300 page document. That's something that I use OneDrive for as well. Basically, you just create a link to that document and you can share it out, and you can expire the link or, put a password on it, rename it all pretty in your email if you want to. but
Definitely.
but that's, that was a great way that would be useful in an agency.
Awesome. Yeah, large file sends, definitely. And then just from the IT side of that for just a moment, a lot of times we'll hear folks that'll be like, I'm just trying to get this attachment. I'm just trying to get these files to, this customer or whatever it is. And, a lot of times we as technical resources can't impact all the places where that file needs to travel on the internet before it gets rejected. And I'm
Mhm.
sure most folks have probably dealt with email rejections because of attachment limits, but that's definitely made that a lot easier. Definitely.
Right.
One other thing to just highlight in terms of OneDrive in particular is back to that desktop and documents folder. Once you're utilizing OneDrive, if you so choose to use that desktop as your place of organization, good news, OneDrive will back it up as well. And so you can, that built-in backup functionality that makes it accessible wherever you're at will allow you to protect those places where you're already working on your local computer.
Right. Yeah. And I have to say, I've actually been in an agency before, and I've seen the scary desktop full of documents.
Oh yeah.
And I'm like, do you have OneDrive? We can put these all in OneDrive and you can still send a shortcut to your desktop. You can still have it on your desktop, but please just protect it in OneDrive first.
Right. The shortcut of the shortcut of the shortcut.
Right? Hey, it
Which,
works.
yep, you do you.
All right, great. So that's great information about OneDrive. So obviously the next question is going to be why would I use SharePoint? I know, one and share. I got it. But
Yep.
tell me more.
Sure. So that's the easy part. I hope at this point in our discussion we've worked that out, and I think we probably have. But let's talk a little bit more specific about what SharePoint was built for and how it's intended to be used. So think of SharePoint as a way that first and foremost you can share documents, files, and folders. And realistically, the most practical use cases that we see for SharePoint are company-wide documents, as well as departmental-based documents. So just rattle off a couple of departments here for an agency.
So like maybe commercial lines, personal lines, we got accounting, marketing's got their own stuff.
Yep.
Claims, all those different departments.
Any and all of those departments, exactly. And the way SharePoint's built is that you can create groups of individuals, put them in a group, and give them permission to view a shared set of documents that you've organized and placed inside of SharePoint. So the great news is, as your folks move around from department to department, or you get new employees, right? As things change, you can easily just change membership on a group. And then, those files will stay in their pure form inside that department, or company documents stay company documents.
Right.
Rather than there being one shared drive and everything's all disorganized and you don't know where to find your stuff, or there's that folder at the top that says like exclamation point, Adam stuff, AAA, Adam stuff.
Or the miscellaneous.
Yeah, miscellaneous folder. Exactly.
What's in there?
Yeah, who and why. So, company-wide documents and departmental documents is the easy win there in SharePoint. Couple other things that we see folks use inside of SharePoint is the actual intranet feature. And SharePoint was built as an intranet, an internal use website. That's where it started, as well as a place to store and share documents. And so it's grown up from its infancy way back in the day, and now it's evolved into this big, huge thing, and built OneDrive around it, and then threw it up with, new Office 365 apps and the whole Microsoft 365 paradigm. And boom, there you go. Now you got SharePoint in the cloud. And so realistically, that SharePoint Online has blown up to be a place where you can easily access those documents, both company-wide or shared within a department, and then even do things like run a little website. Maybe your marketing team has a little website where they have resources, files, and folders, or maybe you run a company calendar where you guys show your events, right? Your events of, your corporate events or your days off, any of those things. It's just another way to kind of consume that data in a visual representation in terms of the website.
Right.
So that's like files and folders in groups of people plus shared website. Those are like the two big components on SharePoint.
So I could think of, just going back to what should go in the agency management system versus what's going to go on SharePoint. I'm thinking along the lines of a procedure manual for the agency. Those applications that are incomplete, you need them. You need to have access to the most recent version, right? But it's in one place that everybody has access to, or your department has access to, because obviously commercial lines doesn't want to deal with personal line stuff, right?
Yep, that's right. Definitely not. And let's talk about that just for a couple more seconds here. So let's say that procedure manual you updated, right? And in the old days, you probably would have placed that file on the shared drive and then emailed everyone and said, hey, it's on the shared drive, or maybe you actually just emailed it and you were like, hey, here's Rev 2 of procedure manual. It's one file in one place where everyone who needs to have access can have access. And then all those revisions and changes, they all stay pure and they're in there. So that's really important, to talk about. And then you can't talk about files and folders and groups of people trying to edit documents and share documents without thinking in terms of document collaboration.
Right.
We could do a song. We're going to stop and not do the collaborate and listen song.
Collaborate and listen.
Yeah, I don't know if we can make it through that whole thing, but in all seriousness, document collaboration, what is that, right? What is that, and why does SharePoint allow me to do that, right? What is document collaboration? So let's just put it in a real practical use case scenario for a second. Keep in mind that before document collaboration tools were built, you couldn't really do these kinds of things. So let's just say you're doing a webinar, right? Maybe your agency's putting together a webinar for your customers, and pick a topic, Lauren, any topic you want, just name one. What do you think?
I'm thinking something along the lines of Microsoft Office 365 for your
Sure.
agency.
Yeah, we'll work out how we're going to title it later because obviously we got to get marketing approval.
We
But
definitely got to get marketing on this.
yeah, so let's say we put together a PowerPoint presentation, and we definitely split the presentation up. We say you get slides, 5 through 10, and I'll work on 10 through 20. We'll
I
share
only have
10.
like 2. I'm only taking like 2.
You're doing 2. That's fine. And so that one file can live inside of the cloud, Microsoft's cloud, and we can actively edit and collaborate on that document together in our different parts. And so what does that look like? What does that even mean? Well, one file saved on the server where you could be on slide 5, I could be on slide 10, or we could both be on it together and see where we're at. Now, the edits are, in near real time if you're editing the same block. So, if you're actively sharing a spreadsheet and you're working with your CEO, and then you like delete the revenue line that he's editing, one of the two of you will win. But that document collaboration is there, and it has some real practical uses. In addition to that, you can even mention other folks to review that document by sending them an @mention. And they'll get an email and know it was updated. Or you could track a folder inside of SharePoint and say, I want to know when the timesheets folder gets a change. And so you set that alert, and that alert will tell you, hey, Lauren dropped her timesheet. Now you can go and process payroll for her pay. So those are a couple of the other big picture features: document collaboration and alerting for change notifications that you can set up, which you couldn't easily do in a shared network drive at home.
Yeah.
Excuse me, not at home, but in your office. Yeah.
Yeah, I can see, agencies using this for things like working on a proposal, maybe the marketing department's working on it, and then maybe the account manager's got some information they want to plug in, and the producer wants to, drop in his 2 cents, whatever the case is. Everybody could work on that. And if marketing says, you know what, I don't approve of what the producer put on there, I'm going to go back to my version, then they could do that, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
And then, so yeah, that's a great way. And then, the other nightmare, I think you mentioned it earlier, is, sending out that version of the document, and now everybody has a different document.
That's right.
With SharePoint, you can have that one document, and you can even notify people from SharePoint when you've dropped a new document in there, or when you've updated the document. So like if you were in a commercial lines environment, you dropped a new form in there for everybody to use for a carrier, then you can notify everybody right from SharePoint and say, hey, there's a new form for, whatever the carrier is. Here's the new supplemental app. Use this one. The old one's gone.
That's right.
So, I think and that's a great way to minimize confusion and stay organized, because if you email it out, then they might just save it somewhere on their My Documents, and then you got the confusion of which document do I use, right?
That's right. Single document, single source of truth. And in addition to that, all the features that large file sends and all of that with sharing with others, both inside and outside your organization, exist. So SharePoint and OneDrive are built on the same backend, which is SharePoint. So those features have parity for sure.
Great. Well, now that we know how we would use SharePoint, next question is going to be, how do I get all of those files from my network drive over into SharePoint?
That's a good question. So let's start out with kind of what you need to know about, how to get them there. So there's a couple sides really, and one is kind of the planning or organizational side of it, and then the other side is really the technical. And the technical, there's lots of different paths, some easier than others. Most probably need help in terms of a technical expert. But let's talk about the organizational side, because that's way more important, honestly, than the technical tasks. So realistically, before you move anything anywhere, let's take the scenario of your new house, right? You're about to buy a new house.
Right.
When you move into that new house, you want to take all your stuff, and as you start to pack it up, you need to make a decision, right? Keep,
Right.
keep box,
Mm-hmm.
archive,
Mm-hmm.
archive box,
Mm-hmm.
or the third box, recycle or trash, whatever your state does, right?
Goodwill.
Where Goodwill, get get gone. Bottom line. So that, it starts with organizing your data, and you
Mhm.
really need to put it into those three core buckets of keep, archive, and get rid of,
Mhm.
recycle, trash, Goodwill, whatever it is. So then that way, when you pack up your things from your new house and
Mhm.
bring them to your new house, you'll unpack them in an organized format.
Right.
So keep pile for the bedroom,
Mhm.
or you can say keep files for accounting department,
Mhm.
or archive files for accounting department, or trash files for accounting department. You better make sure you kept the 7-year backlog requirement there before you trash them.
Good point.
But bottom line, before you just jump ship and move everything from wherever it is now to the new place, you have to have a plan. You have
Right.
to organize it, and you have to think about how it's being used by your people and how it will be used in the future. And so that's the foundational how. How do I get my files? You start with the plan.
Right.
Um,
So,
after,
sorry to interrupt you, but it kind of reminds me of migrating from one agency management system to another. You got to go through that process of implementation and plan what you're going to, clean up, what can be done automatically, what do you have to do manually, and, what are you going to do when you get it over there? So,
that's right.
definitely sounds like kind of the same situation.
Oh yeah, completely. Very similar process, organized approach, methodical, and an understanding not just of what most folks don't care about, which is the technical detail, but
Mhm.
actually the organizational plan and
Mhm.
detail, right? And that has to sit in the larger perspective as well of planning the big picture. So yeah, very very similar in changing out an agency management system for sure.
Got it. So it sounds like maybe I need to call an expert, right?
You
I,
better,
I
because
can't just drag and drop my files over.
you can, but then I'm going to charge you twice as much as I would have if you came to me first. Eek. All right. How
Thank
about that
goodness I
next
have
one?
Adam. So, oh gosh, thanks for that, Adam.
You got it.
So the next thing we need to know about, agencies I'm sure are asking, how do we access the documents that are on OneDrive or SharePoint? So we've got our plan, we've implemented it. How do you actually see the stuff that you put in these two places?
Right. Well, let's hope that that's a question you're asking before you implement it. How am I going to access it? Right. And so let's just talk about what the options are, how you could access it. There's a couple of key areas where you can access your data once it's actually there. The first one is the desktop computer experience. And so most of you are using a desktop computer today. Um, Once you're using a modern operating system in the Windows world, that's a Windows 10 minimum. And then inside of the Mac space, it's one of the modern Mac OSs. That's a desktop computer interface. And from there, you'll be able to access the documents that live inside of Microsoft 365, both OneDrive and SharePoint at the desktop level.
Mhm.
And then in addition to that, you'll access the apps, the Microsoft Office applications. So that's the desktop. Most folks are already doing that. It's not really a change in what they're used to. It's really just a matter of going from the shared drive, which was an S drive or a T drive, whatever it was, A for accounting, etc., to it being available inside of SharePoint or
Mhm.
OneDrive. So that's the change of the files and folders experience.
So
Um,
you can keep me comfortable and let me, go to
that's
a,
right.
a
That's
folder
right.
on a desktop if I want to.
That's correct. And that's a safe step for most folks that they take. They're not necessarily ready to ask the questions of, well, I really want to access things in different ways. They're not on that bleeding edge, if you will, of change, right?
Mhm.
So let's talk about the couple of other places where you could access that data. The first one really is the mobile experience. Nowadays, folks are thinking about being mobile, right?
Mhm.
And mobility typically means a smartphone or some type of tablet, right? And so it's important to know that anything you take inside of Microsoft and Office 365 is available from the apps that are available on the major platforms of Android and iOS and
Mhm.
iPad OS. Microsoft actively develops all of their applications for those platforms and keeps up support for them. So those documents are available for you on the mobile and tablet platform. And it's really important to know that they'll continue to update them into their most recent versions. Now, understand that if you don't keep up with your smartphone or tablet versions, you may find that features trail behind the development cycle. So it is important to stay updated on those things.
Mhm.
Um, the last place really is the web experience, and I would call it the web app experience. Let's say you go to a hotel kiosk and all you have access to is that hotel kiosk in the business center. From
Mhm.
there, you'll have a web browser. You can log into that web browser and access your data there. Now, of course, you're going to want to be secure, so you better have two-factor authentication on. If you don't, you might be at risk. But in all seriousness, you can access your data there that lives on OneDrive, SharePoint, as well as edit applications, edit data inside of any of those applications live in the browser. That's kind of the primary places where you would access it.
Great.
Yeah,
Sounds good. Um, by the way, I don't use the desktop at all anymore.
great.
I
Lauren, you
forgot.
made the
I
jump to
forgot.
browser. You did. You did.
All right,
So
cool.
I think we need to kind of jump through a couple of these slides so we can leave room for some questions
Sure,
um,
absolutely.
at the end. But if it's okay, I'll go ahead and just take us through this security question.
Certainly.
Awesome. So the security piece, a lot of folks are asking the question, is my data secure? And the short version of it is Microsoft gives you the ability to keep it secure. That's the
Mhm.
great part about building and moving into Microsoft's cloud is they have all the security controls you could need to stay HIPAA compliant. New York NYCR 500, I can't remember all the acronyms, PCI, anything that is some type of compliance. Microsoft likely is already meeting the standard or has something in progress for it. The last one that I'll talk about in terms of data security is a global one, which is called GDPR, and that's the Global Data Residency Policy. And
Mhm.
really what that means is Microsoft is giving their business customers the ability to keep their data on US soil. And that's a feature that a lot of countries are asking for now. We want to keep it here in the US or we want to keep it in the UK. And the
Mhm.
great news is that their robust platform is built to give us those options. So data security is an assumption. And as your security requirements grow, Microsoft's building tools to continue to keep up with things as their service develops.
Definitely. It's great information.
Awesome. Thank you. So I think we're going to do a quick Teams dive,
Yes. So
right?
we did. So just a reminder for everybody, we did a webinar not long ago on Teams as well. We're going to go through it today, but you can find the other webinar, I believe, on our website also.
That's right. So we're just going to highlight the feature of Teams because Teams is really the center point of, the communication inside your organization. And so we're just going to quickly show you that capability. Microsoft had Skype a time ago, and they still do, but they're kind of creating a sunsetting of that development cycle to replace it for Teams. Teams is Microsoft's version of integration inside all the tools that they're building. And so I'm going to quickly highlight and run through the main feature areas of what Teams has. So you'll see here on the left, the sidebar is built with the activity, which shows you what's going on across the various things, the chat function, and inside chat, you'll see direct messages or messages of groups of folks if you do a private message. And then you also see this teams, which I've highlighted here for our team today. You can see here that we're showing inside of the Kite Tech org-wide channel, so everyone's a member of this, the DPRK Fun Activities and Events channel. And what is this? What is this whole thing? This is a place where we have some fun, a little bit anyway. So we'll scroll to the very top and you can see that this channel's purpose was for us to find a way to celebrate Spirit Friday themes. And so we've listed those here and we have the ability to reply and participate in the conversation. So this is one way that you can use Teams for group communication inside of channels. In addition to that, you can also see a view of your live calendar. You can see here, this is just my day view. We do have the ability to switch day view between work week and week. And then you can also see that there's a calling button and files. And I'm sure most of you have participated inside of some form of a meeting. So you probably know what that looks like, an online meeting at this point. But really, these are the places where you would actually call someone, or you could actually join a meeting that you already have on your calendar here today. So that's just a quick, real rundown. And then you'll also notice that there's a Files tab. And this Files tab shows you a bunch of things that are inside of the environment for you to explore and save your files inside of Office 365. So that's Teams, a quick kind of snap through, and that kind of puts us back into really kind of the strategy conversation, if you will. So let's go ahead and pull that up, and we'll cover that as we're preparing for questions. Realistically, you want to ask yourself the question of where do we go from here, or what kind of strategy, what does a strategy look like? And so here's a couple of things that are kind of key takeaways of what you want to do to make sure you have your strategy ready to roll. First step is define the vision. If you don't have a vision for what you want to use the tools for, this is the place to start. You really have to have a vision for where you're going to grow. The second step is to get leadership support. So if you're really excited and interested in growing in these tools, you need to get leadership around that vision, and you need to get them to buy into that. Otherwise, it's probably not going to happen. Next step is really be prepared to train your end users. There's going to be a component of training associated with any of these changes, and you want to make sure you can anticipate what that change looks like for them so they can be ready to use the products once you're there. Also have a mindset of expecting change to come. I say that, and in the world that we live in today, it's probably an afterthought that everyone's expecting change to come. What I mean specifically is technically and features wise, expect these products to evolve and continue to grow as our needs change. And then lastly, be prepared to reevaluate your vision along the way. And so know that the plan changes. And a lot of us, I think, know that now. Our plan for Q2 did not look like it does today. And just know that if you're going to do this well, you have to pause and reevaluate your vision as you move through the process of the strategy. And that'll be at key milestones as you move forward. How about some next steps, Lauren?
Great, of course. So before we go into questions, we do want to talk about some next steps that you can take on your Microsoft 365 journey. So the first thing is obviously you need to have that strategy. Recognize that you need a strategy for the deployment of Microsoft 365. Again, very similar to if you were planning on migrating from one agency management system to another. Another thing you can do is make sure that you determine what your agency is actually needing. What's that end goal? What areas in your agency could you be more efficient in as far as document management is concerned, and also with communication and organization. And then, of course, the last and most important point, because I'm not an expert, is to consult with an expert. That could be your IT, whoever your current IT provider is, or of course you could contact us for a consultation as well. Like I said, we have extensive experience in working with insurance agencies, and we know how Microsoft 365 can work for your agency specifically. So, Adam, tell us a little bit about what does consulting with an expert look like?
Sure. Yeah. So the first step in any good plan is really to have a conversation, right? And you have to start that conversation based on a needs assessment. What exactly are you looking to accomplish, or what are your goals? And so realistically, that's where we start. We would start having a conversation by saying, what are you trying to accomplish, and how can we help you get there? Quite simply said, a consultation could start with that conversation. What are your needs? How can you get there? And you see on the screen here a couple of the standard things that we see folks, taking as first steps: the standardization of apps, the migration to hosted email, also some sort of data security policy around that company data and access to it. Additionally, data moves from OneDrive and SharePoint over to Microsoft 365, two-factor authentication or multi-factor authentication for security. And then Teams adoption is the other big one that we're seeing nowadays with, the remote deployments and everyone working from home. So those are really kind of where we see, and it all starts with a strategy conversation and a needs assessment, of course.
Great. Thanks so much. So
Welcome.
obviously, if you'd like to schedule a complimentary consultation with one of our Microsoft 365 consultants, you can contact us here via email, give us a call, or you can visit our website for more information as well. As we begin polling questions, we hope that today's presentations provided you a good overview of what you can accomplish with Office 365. So in the few minutes we've got left, we're going to go through some of the questions you guys have been asking. So the first question, Adam, this one's for you, is my iPad calendar app connects to my Office 365 work calendar, but sometimes I can't see the entire meeting description on the iPad. Is this a known problem with Office 365 or a problem with my iPad?
Good question. So this is a problem with the iPad specifically. And the reason why is because the iPad has a default calendar application that will allow you to see certain things, but it won't necessarily allow you to see all of your calendar as it lives inside of Microsoft 365. So the best way to solve this problem is to use the native apps that Microsoft builds around their services. And so in this case, it would be the Outlook mobile app. From there, you'll be able to see your calendar, its full details, as well as things like sharing with others. You really want to go and use those apps because they're built to work not just with the one thing you're looking at, which is the calendar and that event detail, but the other services like email and files and folders and all the other things you're sharing with your organization and folks outside of it. So definitely a problem with the limits on the software of the iPad itself.
Great. Thanks, Adam.
Welcome.
So the next question for you is, what factors determine whether we can deploy SharePoint, OneDrive, Teams on our own, or should we get a consultant involved?
Good question. That specific question is one that starts with the conversation of what are you trying to do? Specifically, if you are just trying to rip and replace something that's there without any organization, you might take the adventure of getting started on your own. But I will caution you that taking a unplanned approach to this can result in what I would consider to be controlled chaos for folks. So it's not one that I would take lightly. It's also important to know when it comes to being an expert in the field of the technology that you can't go through a plan like this just with an IT staff person that can execute the technical details. You actually need to have somebody who understands your business goals, the outcomes, and how you operate as an agency. And so really, you want to make sure that if you're going to try to take this on your own and not get someone involved, that you get all those parties together. If you have internal IT plus someone who plans for your company, otherwise you're probably going to miss the boat in some way, shape, or form.
Great. Thank you so much.
Welcome.
So next question we have for you. I work with several computers. How do you separate what you want in OneDrive versus all documents? For example, I have personal letters on my laptop. How would I keep them off of OneDrive? Is it all or nothing?
Great question. So you can make decisions on what you back up to OneDrive, definitely. Though I would say that you want to make sure those documents are protected, either way, right? So, if you don't have OneDrive, protecting those documents, you ask yourself the question, well, how do I separate them or make sure that they're backed up? But the answer to the question is yes, you can choose what you want to back up to OneDrive. You can do that through the selective sync feature inside of OneDrive itself.
Great.
At the desktop client.
Got it. And just to piggyback off that response, Adam, can you also add your own personal OneDrive on your computer if you have a personal OneDrive?
That's a great question. So you can add multiple Microsoft accounts to a single computer, yes. And so, you could have a OneDrive personal account and a OneDrive business account running on the same computer and separate those documents there. You could actually have multiple. I don't know what the account limit is, but you can definitely add multiple for sure. Yes.
Got it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So next question for you. We currently have a NAS device where scanned documents are sent, but we also use it as a place where we save files instead of a desktop. Is OneDrive or SharePoint really the way to go for my employees instead of the NAS device?
Sure, yeah, that's a great question. So the answer is, do you ever want to leave the building? But seriously, yes, definitely. OneDrive and SharePoint give you the ability to remove the tether of that physical space. And the other thing we didn't really cover earlier was kind of the unconventional ways it feels like nowadays to get back to that corporate data, through a VPN or extra software here and there. If you put the data on OneDrive and SharePoint and secure it properly, you can control that data and how it rests and what is done with it, and you can access it wherever you're at. The local NAS or network attached storage device that is being referred to is just a different version of a file share or a file server. There are actually some requirements for legacy apps that still require local file shares, but most things that you do today can be moved into the Microsoft 365 environment in some way. So almost if you're using a cloud-based agency management system, almost everything that you're using there will allow you to leverage the other pieces of the Microsoft 365 environment and give up most of that on-prem hardware.
Okay. Great. So it sounds like we need to be able to leave the office.
Definitely, for sure.
Especially right now.
Yep.
So here's a good question. This says, give me just a second, I lost my spot. Is there a way to track who you have shared a folder or document with? The answer is yes. But more in detail, I'm going to need Adam to give the details.
Yeah, for sure. So the question, just to repeat it, is there a way that you can track who you've shared a document with, just for everyone that's listening? The answer is yes. And one of the other things that you can actually see is all of the sharing links that you've put out there as an administrator of that data. And that's one of the features that Microsoft's recently developed, the ability to provide a sharing report. And in addition to that, one step further that you probably care about is you can actually control whether or not you allow your employees to share that data externally outside the organization, both data that lives in SharePoint and data that lives in OneDrive, and capture the reports on them. Yep.
Great. Okay, so Adam, we are getting real close to time.
Yep, we sure are.
Do we want to keep asking a few or answering a few more questions for those folks that want to hang out?
I think we probably want to take one more question and then probably say thanks.
All right, sounds good. Um, so let's take a look.
I found a good one.
You have one
Yep.
that you want?
Yeah, I found one. So the question was, what about files or document libraries in Teams?
Right.
And I think the question is, what are files or document libraries in Teams? And here's the great thing: we didn't show this in the live overview of Teams, but I alluded to the Files tab, right? And inside of Teams itself, both inside of the team, where you have various teams, the org-wide team, and then individual teams for, let's say, departments. Inside of Teams, it creates a default document library for every single one of those teams. Therefore, you can interact and share and manipulate those files right inside of Teams or on your desktop or the web experience. And the document library is the storage repository that's the cornerstone of how you share files inside of SharePoint. The rest of it exists across all the applications, and you can access those document libraries from whichever app you're in. But yeah, that's a great question about document libraries and Teams. They're there, and that data that you put in SharePoint, you can get straight out of Teams. You can even edit it. Wow.
Pretty awesome. Yeah,
Yep.
we do that in my department because, I'm never on site. I'm always remote. So I'm used to doing this. And so, I do this a lot with Kelly, one of our other consultants. When we're working on a document, we'll work on it there in Teams. Sometimes we'll go to SharePoint, but she can pop it up in Teams and we can work on it there too. So
that's right. And you can edit and share it live right inside your Teams meeting, which is awesome.
It is very cool.
I think that's about it. I think I almost heard oh, there it is. That's we're over time.
We are. This is terrible. We just have so much valuable information. It's so hard to stop.
It is hard to stop.
And such great questions from those of you who joined us today. So thanks again, everyone, for joining us for today's presentation. If you would like to learn more about Kite Tech's IT and consulting services, you can reach out to us using any of the ways listed here. We would be happy to set up a complimentary consultation to talk with you about your technology needs. Our next webinar is scheduled for May 12th and will focus on developing an effective security awareness program. You can sign up for that one on our website under the Resources tab. So thanks again, everyone, for spending time with us today. Hope you have enjoyed this session. Hope everybody stays safe and take care and be healthy.
Stay safe, everyone. Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.